what's up. So my setup has evolved a little bit. That's all we'll be acknowledging of that. But other than that, I don't really have anything to talk about. So let's just cut to the chase. Why don't we? I think it's finally time to bring my spiciest Yu-Gi-Oh takes to the table once again. I really thought that over the course of this whole pandemic thing, I would develop maybe some normal adult hobbies like actually getting better at cooking or, I don't know, yoga or plant keeping. But instead, I suppose I just occasionally pop into Yu-Gi-Oh YouTube and stir shit up. So, but yeah, third time's a charm. Today, let's finally talk about why Kaiba is a victim. Is that a hot take? Is that even the take I'm trying to make now that I think about it? Maybe not, but I'll just figure it out over the course of this talk, I suppose. Either way, people are going to overanalyze the things I say in this unscripted video and fight about it in the comments, so who cares? Let's go. So just your rundown of warnings as per usual. I will be spoiling Yu-Gi-Oh! The original series, which, you know, if you're still worried about having the ending of Yu-Gi-Oh! Spoiled for you in 2020, good for you. But really though, I will also be spoiling the newer movie from 2016-2017, Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Side of Dimensions, which I think is a really great movie. And I feel like maybe listening to me talk about it would ruin that viewing experience for you. And if you care about, you know, watching that movie, you should probably just do it before you watch this video, because I will be discussing the ending of that as well. And just another heads up, this character study of Seto Kaiba will be focusing a lot on the anime, because like I said, I've recorded this video a couple times, and the first time I did it, I tried to cover both the anime and the manga version of Kaiba, and it was too much, and I actively became stupider during the course of that video trying to recall all that information. So I'm just not gonna really talk too much about the manga until it's incredibly necessary. And two, this will focus a lot on the English dub. I didn't really touch on this in the last couple videos I did. I just kind of didn't get around to it, but I like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dubs. I think they're fine. Truly, let's not fight about this, but I'm just saying, if you can't appreciate the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX 4Kids dub for the comedic masterpiece it is, you're wrong. But of course, because the English dubs tend to, you know, retool the script a lot and change a lot of minor details, you will always have, you know, different media experiences consuming one or the other. But I'm the most familiar with the English dub for the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's what I grew up with, and I kind of never went back and watched the sub. Sorry. But yeah, a lot of this character interpretation of mine will hinge a lot on the English version of Kaiba. In case some of y'all are going to be real nitpicky about that, I'm just putting it out there now. And as usual, sorry again for any visual, audio, miscellaneous technological hiccups. I've given up. I've given up on quality. What do I look like? A YouTuber? But yeah, after several failed attempts to record this specific video, if this footage comes out usable, I'll chalk that up as a win. The bar is on the floor. I would love if it was known that I do have this delightful Kaiba Corp hoodie that I would have liked to have worn for this video, but I don't know if you can tell, but it's almost August, and I know my air conditioner takes up a good chunk of the space behind me, but I don't run it while I record for the sake of potentially bettering the audio quality. You're welcome, America. So we're not gonna wear this. Sorry. But anywho, let's talk about Seto Kaiba, the most iconic Yu-Gi-Oh! Character. I'm not even gonna try to take any hard stances in this video because I know y'all are gonna come at my throat if I use the word objectively wrong one more time, sarcastically or not. So, but he is iconic. So I have a bit of a reputation as like a big Kaiba fan, which I don't know, maybe. Like to the point that people would actually be a little bit surprised to learn that he's not my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh franchise character. That would be Manjome and Jim Crocodile Cook, because I have famously good taste. But Kaiba's definitely a solid number 3. He wasn't even like a character I enjoyed very much growing up watching the show. It was definitely a real slow burn affection for this guy. Just the older I got and the more I read way too much into his character, the more I was like, actually, real good stuff. But yeah, fucking everyone knows Seto Kaiba. I say that he is the iconic character of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I stand by that. Aesthetically, Yugi is iconic, yes. And Yami Yugi a little bit more so, but Kaiba is special. He's rich, he's like super extra, he's cutthroat, he's a Scorpio. He uses the Blue Eyes White Dragons, which have gone on to become such iconic monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! He did that. And like, I feel like nowadays Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not super in with the mainstream. It's one of those things where like you'll see memes of it that, you know, outside of non-Yu-Gi-Oh! People will share, and like you just immediately understand it. And they all have to do with Kaiba or Exodia, who doesn't even do that much. Who's Exodia? Yugi might be the face of Yu-Gi-Oh! You know, the iconic anime from our childhoods. But Kaiba is the beating heart of what made it interesting. He's so weird. And you know what? I think Kaiba gets a bad rap. Just to make it clear, that's the point of this video. Bitches are out here defending Seto Kaiba's honor, and it's me. I'm bitches. And I can't think of a better way to overstate my point than by overanalyzing Kaiba's history in Yu-Gi-Oh! The anime by going over the whole thing. But like a short version. Like a short version of Yu-Gi-Oh! A condensed Yu-Gi-Oh! Some may say it's, God, I can't think of anything. But yeah, let us begin. So season 1 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is weird. This was the real Wild West of Yu-Gi-Oh! At the very start of the series, but also at the peak of its popularity, where they didn't even follow the rules of the card game in the show, and everything was just absolutely bonkers crazy. And there's a lot of really bonkers shit happening in season 1, but Kaiba really hits the ground running with being like an absolute mad lad. So in the first episode, we get introduced to Yugi and his friends, but we also get introduced in passing to Kaiba because he goes to school with Yugi and his buds. Like this one time, we see Kaiba at school once, and he's wearing like the school uniform, and it's so weird. Yeah, we meet Kaiba. He is like the Duel Monsters world champion. He's something, but like we know immediately that he is a very high-ranking Duel Monsters player, while Yugi and his friends are like still getting into it. But yeah, like we all know what happens in episode 1. Kaiba comes into the card shop, wants to buy the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Grandpa says no. Kaiba comes back later, kidnaps Grandpa, steals the Blue Eyes, tears the Blue Eyes. He has the other 3 Blue Eyes. And then him and Yugi duel, and Yugi turns into Yami Yugi, and then they do, you know what they do. Draw your last pathetic card, Yugi. My grandpa's deck has no pathetic cards, Kaiba, but it does have Exodia. Why? Exodia? It's not possible. You know, they do that. And then Yami Yugi does this weird thing where he mind crushes Kaiba, and it's not super clear what that does. The way I believe it works is that he makes Kaiba less evil, because apparently Kaiba has been evil up until this point. So he gives him a little mental health zap, and now Kaiba is thrown into a bit of an existential crisis. So that's episode 1. So after that, Kaiba kind of steps down from playing Duel Monsters and essentially goes on a mental health retreat. And he's kind of sequestered off on this cliffside house that I guess is his house. Side note, it's not super clear where Kaiba lives. Where does Kaiba live? Meanwhile, Duelist Kingdom is starting, and Pegasus is trying to, target Kaiba and egg him on to join Duelist Kingdom or something because business reasons. So there's these 5 guys that work under Kaiba called the Big 5. I don't remember their individual names because truly it does not matter. I know one of them is named Nesbit, and as far as I'm concerned, they're all named Nesbit. But the Big 5 work for Kaiba, and they want to overthrow him and kick him out of Kaiba Corp or something. So they're actually working with Pegasus to achieve that, I suppose. I forget. So they send some men after Kaiba to his cliffside house, and they burst in, fingers pointing, and they're gonna take Kaiba away. And this is the first iconic Kaiba moment of the series, really, where he's just like, oh, you're gonna take me away? Sure would be crazy if I jumped out of a window or something, so you couldn't do that. So Kaiba jumps out of a window, and they run over to the window, and they look out, and it's a cliffside, so it's just a really far drop, and they're like, oh shit. I think Kaiba's dead. And they don't bother checking any further. But they take his deck because he left it on his desk. Also, Mokuba gets kidnapped at some point, but that's just a given in any season of Yu-Gi-Oh! So then there's this really confusing thing that happens. And it's confusing because they did the fun thing in the dub where they make it even more convoluted than it actually is, for some reason. So meanwhile, Yugi and the gang are just off in Duelist Kingdom, and then this real grody version of Kaiba shows up to bully Yugi, and he's like, yeah, I'm the ghost of Kaiba. Ooh, because you, Yugi, ruined my life and I died, and now I'm a ghost. But it's not a ghost. It's actually this clown man who I think it's straight up he is a master of disguise or some kind of shapeshifter or something, because Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 1 was just really weird. But yeah, he's just some guy that Pegasus hired to fuck with Yugi because he could, and he has Kaiba's deck now, so he can just do that. But in the dub, they say that it is actually the evil that was banished from Kaiba when Yugi mind zapped him. And I don't understand why they did that, because that's really bizarre. But yeah, there's just this clown guy pretending to be dead Kaiba, and everyone's just like, did Kaiba actually die though? Because that would be really fucked up. But this dead Kaiba guy, he does have the blue eyes, which we know there's only 3 of, so it does lend a little bit of credibility to his story about being a ghost. And I guess there were weirder things. We are still in season 1, and up until this point, we, the audience, are not super clear on what exactly happened to Kaiba either, so maybe he is dead. But then it turns out Kaiba's not dead. Obviously, because when he jumped out of the window, he grabbed on with one hand to a small ledge on the cliff and was able to hold himself there. And I think he was carrying a briefcase. Kaiba's really strong. Strong personality, strong arms. But yeah, he was able to rescue himself and I guess pull himself back up the cliffside, which is insane. But the point is, Kaiba is fine and he's able to sneak into this little basement thing that he has in his cliffside house and hop onto this supercomputer that he made and hack into the Duelist Kingdom mainframe and help Yugi win that duel by fucking up his own deck, because no one's allowed to use the blue eyes except Kaiba. I mean, come on. He almost killed an old man for that, right? Let him have that. But the scene is extra funny when you think about it because he hacks into the Duelist Kingdom mainframe essentially by playing a video game. And I guess the implication here is that not only did Kaiba build like a hacking supercomputer smart machine that he could speak to and use to hack into Pegasus's private island security network, but he also programmed a UI that looks like a dungeon crawler, and I think that's adorable. But the point is, be it by his own motivation or not, he does help Yugi in this instance. And then it's off to Duelist Kingdom for Kaiba, finally. The next real important Kaiba moment in Duelist Kingdom is his duel against Yugi, because he has to duel Yugi to get into Pegasus Castle because there's an anti-rule with the star chip thing. So Yugi has enough star chips that if Kaiba can beat him, he can just burst on in and save Mokuba. But literally everyone had like someone to save in Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 1. So Yugi, of course, is like, I can't let you do that because I gotta save my grandpa. So they duel and they're using like Kaiba's prototype duel disc because he brought that with them, because of course he did. Kaiba really is like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Kid at your school. Like, he brought his duel disc to school and everyone else is just like, and he like makes you play him and he's using the duel disc. Like, we get it, Kaiba. You play Yu-Gi-Oh! So yeah, they duel and they do it like on top of these castle towers and it's very cool and they're using the duel discs and it's like, ooh. It's a pretty tight duel, but the tides are turning in Yugi's favor. Kaiba has his Blue Eyes Ultimate on the field and it's like so powered down he can barely use it, and Yugi can win in the following turn. And Kaiba's low-key freaking out because he's got to save Mokuba. And like, everyone in Duelist Kingdom is so dog-eat-dog about it, even though the ending of Duelist Kingdom is literally just, oh yeah, they all got what they wanted because Yugi split the prize like a nice person. But really, up until that happens, everyone is so like intensely, I gotta win or else. But that sort of thing is very much hardwired into Kaiba's personality anyway. Unable to accept that he may lose this duel and lose the chance to save his brother, he decides to do something, just peak Kaiba. So the fun thing about Kaiba's duel discs is that they have a bit more impact than just the regular holograms, I think. So like if a monster attacks, you can kind of feel the wind of it. Like maybe it's not dangerous, but there's something about it. So naturally, Kaiba climbs up onto the edge of the tower and he's just like, are you going to attack me, Yugi? Well, you better make it count. You better attack me so hard that the wind knocks me back and I fly off that tower. You better hit me so hard that I die. Can you deal with that? Can you live with Seto Kaiba's blood on your hands? And this is a very fun Season 1 Yugi character moment because Yugi's like, of course I can't do that. And Yami Yugi is just like, why not? So even though Yami does call the attack, Yugi takes over and calls it off and forfeits, meaning that Kaiba wins. Yay, Kaiba. Well earned, buddy. And then Kaiba goes in to duel Pegasus. Pegasus kind of fucks with him a little by flaunting brainwashed Mokuba out and upsetting Kaiba. And then Kaiba just loses. Yay, Kaiba. And that's kind of it for Duelist Kingdom. Once Yugi wins the whole thing, Kaiba naturally is free, and so is Mokuba, so he was really ready to risk it all for nothing. But Kaiba does give everyone a ride back from Duelist Kingdom, and that's adorable, so hooray. And Season 1 ends with this little mini arc. I believe it's called the Legendary Heroes arc. It's like a 3 or 4 episode thing where Kaiba returns from Duelist Kingdom and the Big Five, having failed to overtake the company with the help of Pegasus, are on to their next scheme where they trap Kaiba in a virtual reality game that he was developing. And this is a really fun arc, but it's really short, so it's not super worth getting into. The real takeaway is that, the Big Five suck and they get stuck in the computer at the end instead. And also that in the game, which is kind of this Legend of Zelda-esque type RPG type game, there is a princess who is modeled after Mokuba. And I'm not going to unpack that here, but it's worth noting. So on to Battle City, which is where my beef really starts. There's a few episodes before Battle City formally starts, and one of them is where we meet Ishizu for the first time. So Kaiba's like prepping the new dual disc and this whole new tournament and stuff, and actually learning the rules to Yu-Gi-Oh! So we can force everyone to finally use them. Thank you. And Ishizu, who is in town, hits him up to come check out her sick ancient Egyptian museum exhibit. And Kaiba's like, why would I do that? I'm kind of busy playing Duel Monsters. And Ishizu's like, yeah, I figured you'd say that. So if you come, I'll, give you a rare card or something. She tempts him with a Yu-Gi-Oh card, and Kaiba's like, oh shit, okay. So Kaiba goes to this museum exhibit, and Ishizu uses her Millennium Necklace to start showing him visions of his past life as an ancient Egyptian priest. He appears to be having some sort of conflict with the pharaoh, who appears to be Yugi, or something like that. It's really weird to go back and look at these early flashbacks once you know how the story actually ends, but I'll get to that later. So Kaiba, known skeptic and atheist royalty, is like, this is stupid. You're tricking me into looking at these things. There's no proof for such things. I am not an ancient Egyptian priest. So Ishizu shows him this big stone tablet, colloquially known as the Tablet of Lost Memories. And it does indeed depict what appears to be Kaiba using what appears to be the Blue Eyes to fight what appears to be Yugi, who seems to be using the Dark Magician. That's carved into a big-ass old rock, so Kaiba's just like, how can this be? And Ishizu's just like, Kaiba, you're an ancient Egyptian priest, and you're destined to fight Yugi forever, I guess. And Kaiba's like, I don't know about that first part, but the point I'm trying to make is this begins the era of insisting that Kaiba is an ancient Egyptian priest. But he does get something out of this, because this is where he gets Obelisk the Tormentor, and Ishizu's like, I'm trying to find the other god cards, so maybe you can keep that in mind when you're building your tournament. And Kaiba does. He adds an anti-rule to Battle City, so, people can steal each other's cards legally. But yeah, so a lot happens in Battle City, and it's too much to talk about. So much fun stuff in Battle City. I will just mention that there are several instances in which Kaiba helps out Yugi and his friends, or even teams up with Yugi to defeat the rare hunters who work for Merrick, the villain of this arc. And things really come to a head when we enter the semifinals with the final 8 contestants. Kaiba, of course, is there. Yugi's there. And one of them is a mysterious woman who's obviously a Shizu. And Kaiba, being the real extra guy that he is, says, yeah, we're not gonna hold the semifinals just anywhere. We're gonna do it on a blimp. Because I like that. So he makes everyone duel on top of this blimp that is traveling to another location for the finals. So the next moment worth really noting is Kaiba duels Ishizu in the semifinals. And Ishizu, having the Millennium Necklace, is like, I can see the future. And I win. Because I can see what you're going to do and what I'm going to do. And Kaiba's like, I don't believe in that. Stop it. So they duel, and Kaiba's like, I'm going to I'm gonna wreck her by using the card that she gave me, Obelisk the Tormentor. But it turns out that in the future, as Shizu can see, playing Obelisk the Tormentor will be how Kaiba loses. So Kaiba is about to like do his Obelisk the Tormentor play, but then he starts having these ancient Egyptian visions again, and he's just like, why does this keep happening? If nothing else, it does just start to get on his nerves, because he's just like, everyone is suddenly just giving me a lot of shit about all this predeterminedness stuff, and I don't like it. So purely out of spite for the idea of fate and things having to be a certain way, Kaiba sacrifices Obelisk the Tormentor for the Blue Eyes White Dragon, his favorite card, and ends up winning the duel because, you know, he defied fate by doing that. And that's kind of badass, don't you think? And Ishizu's very shocked like this. She's like, how can someone just go against the way things are supposed to be? And it's like, lady, it's Kaiba. But yeah, that's a pretty cool moment. I like that moment. And all the while during Battle City, Kaiba starts having these glimpses into this weird ancient Egyptian stuff and then just getting angry about it because, like, he never asked for this. And I agree, he did never ask for this. But before anything really comes to a head with, like, you know, finishing Battle City and Merrick being super evil and stuff, we get a fun little interruption in the form of Noah's Ark. And this is why I chose to focus on like anime Kaiba, let's be honest. Noah's Ark is an anime only arc. It's not in the manga. It is another virtual reality arc, which those are fun. It's a little less fun in some ways because it doesn't involve the RPG element of the Legendary Heroes arc where everyone dresses up and has to, you know, do set tasks for a princess that looks like Mokuba. So that's kind of too bad, but it has a lot of other stuff going for it. This arc is kind of iconic in a really odd way. It is the arc that originated Monkey Tristan and just shitting on Tristan more so than they already did in general. So everybody say thank you. But even more importantly, this is the arc where we get Kaiba's full backstory, and boy oh boy if it ain't a lot. So just to get it out of the way, basically what's happening in Noah's Ark is everyone except for Ishizu and Odeon and Merrick, now Yami Merrick, get sucked into this VR game and have to survive it. And the big five are there: Nesbit and Nesbit and Nesbit and Nesbit and Nesbit. But this time they have fun virtual avatars based on their favorite Yu-Gi-Oh monsters. So that's fun because one of them's a penguin. And that's what I liked. But yeah, those five are now working with a new little conspirer named Noah, who is watching over this entire virtual world and is revealed to be but a child by appearance. And this fucking kid hates Kaiba. We're gonna find out why. Cue Kaiba's backstory. So, Seto, not yet Kaiba, and his brother Mokuba were normal kids, supposedly. I do believe that even before he became a kaiba, Seto did have a bit of the child genius going on. He did seem that way, but and maybe he was still kind of extra, but to a much lesser degree. They were normal kids, and then their parents died, I believe, in a car accident. And I forget exactly what happens because there is some crossover here with the manga in my brain, but their relatives couldn't take care of them, or they robbed them, one or the other. So Seto and Mokuba are now in this orphanage, and it doesn't seem like the worst time because they can play a lot of games together. Kaiba especially always loved games. He really liked to play chess and stuff. So that was a source of happiness for him and Mokuba. So one day, this fucking guy shows up. Gozaburo Kaiba. And Gozaburo Kaiba was the president of Kaiba Corp. And this guy sucks. He's awful. He's just like a bad person. He's kind of your standard, like, bad businessman. And he came to this orphanage not even really to like help, but really just for PR. He wanted to snap a few photos with a few orphans and then get out of there. But Seto sees this as an opportunity for a better life. True to what we've seen of his personality thus far in the series, he goes up to Gozaburo and challenges him to a game of chess. The condition being that if Seto wins, Gozaburo has to adopt him and Mokuba. And Gozaburo's just like, you think I'm just gonna accept this challenge? That's kind of stupid. Like, that would be dumb of me to accept such a high stakes challenge from like a little baby who I could probably beat anyway. And Kaiba's like, oh, could you? Then why don't you just do it? Are you scared? Are you scared of a baby? He just starts to like neg Gozaburo on, and Gozaburo falls for it pretty quickly. And he's just like, okay, fine. I will beat your ass at chess. So, for nothing more than a matter of pride, Gozaburo adopts Mokuba and Seto, making them kaibas. But I think it's pretty clear that they didn't start off on good terms, so it definitely doesn't help the fact that Gozaburo really wants to groom Kaiba into a cutthroat business type guy, you know, to take over Kaiba Corp, which, by the way, at this point in time, is actually a weapons dealing company. Fun fact, if you didn't know that, Kaiba Corp used to build tanks. But yeah, so Gozaburo wanted Kaiba to also be a very brutal business person, you know, be he ever take over the company, and put him on a very intense, borderline abusive schooling route. Like, Kaiba was homeschooled. He was completely isolated from other people. Like, every day he was worked to the bone. He was incredibly exhausted all the time, but still expected to do more. And there were physical punishments for not working hard enough. It was bad. And if I recall correctly, Mokuba did not have it as bad. Kaiba was kind of the target of Gozaburo's ire because, you know, he made fun of Gozaburo and tricked him into adopting him and his brother. So, you know, of course, Gozaburo is going to take out all of his angy-wangies on Kaiba, but, you know, it's still pretty harsh. But yeah, Mokuba did not have to deal with as bad a treatment as Kaiba did, but it wasn't that great either. And, like, neither of them were allowed to really, like, have any type of childhood, no toys, no fun. They had a bad time and each other. So just pointing it out that Kaiba had a pretty rough upbringing. And to tie this back into the plot of this arc of the anime, Gozaburo actually had a biological son named Noah, who, when he was quite young, actually died in a car accident. These drivers need to get their shit sorted out. But yeah, Noah died very young. And Gozaburo, being this really rich guy with access to military technology, I suppose, was able to salvage Noah's brain, because Noah was also a bit of a child genius, and put it into a computer. So he had Noah living in this computer, just kind of eternally a child, but also not. And when he adopted Kaiba, he had this plot to transfer Noah's brain into Kaiba's body so he could have like his son back essentially and just carry on as they were. Gozaburo ended up kind of preferring Kaiba in a weird, not in a father-son type of way, but in kind of like a begrudging respect for someone in your field kind of way, I guess. But yeah, he kind of took a shine to Kaiba and ended up abandoning Noah in the computer. So now Noah is angry at Kaiba and seeking revenge and wanting to steal his body now. But yeah, it's a very fun arc for Kaiba, who is basically in a world of his own childhood trauma and having to relive his shit childhood. And it's worth noting that when I say he's reliving his trauma, he's having no emotional reaction to this because that's just the type of person Kaiba is anymore. So it's a good time. But yeah, they have to spend a while in this virtual reality world uncovering what the hell is going on and not getting body snatched by one of the many Nesbits. And it's eventually revealed that Gozaburo is in this computer too. Because, to rewind a bit, when Kaiba was learning all of this business stuff, Gozaburo gave him a few shares of Kaiba Corp and was like, figure it out. And like, Kaiba's already a bit of a boy genius, so this wasn't a huge stretch for him, but like, now he's also becoming a cutthroat businessman. So he really starts from within, and he's like 13 or something at this point. He's very young. He approaches the big five, who at that time were still in the company and worked under Gozaburo. And he's like, I feel like Gozaburo kind of treats you like shit. If I were to take over the company, though, I would probably treat you better. And they were kind of down for that. So they were willing to give their shares to Kaiba. And by doing some morally ambiguous business doings, Kaiba was able to raise a lot more money and buy even more shares in Kaiba Corp. And it got to the point where both Gozaburo and Kaiba had like 49% share in Kaiba Corp. And the remaining 2% was held by Mokuba, who, is here. And Gozaburo was trying very hard to manipulate Mokuba into giving him the 2% to ensure that he'll always have majority share over Kaiba, especially because at the time Seto was like getting really upset with Mokuba a lot and just kind of like lashing out at him because, he was being emotionally abused. And so that was really bad for Mokuba, and Mokuba kind of wasn't sure what to do, but he did end up giving his shares to Kaiba. Yay! So Kaiba became the majority shareholder of Kaiba Corp and ousted Gozaburo from it because he can do that now. Kaiba then stopped weapons productions and turned it into a gaming company, and Gozaburo, ashamed by what happened, disappeared, aka he killed himself. Except he didn't, because he uploaded his own mind into the same computer with Noah's or something, and now he's there too. Which I don't remember what his exit strategy for this grand plan was, now that I think about it, But yeah, Gozaburo's there too, to pick at old wounds. And I don't know what the consensus of Noah's Arc is amongst fans. I feel like if you like Kaiba and you like this character work for him, you love Noah's Arc, like me. But if you wanted to see Battle City finished, you hated Noah's Arc because, ugh. Kaiba's backstory is basically the same in the manga, except without, all the Noah parts. It's basically just Gozaburo was a bad man and did all those things for his own reasons. But I do like that they spend a lot of time on it in the anime, and they try to rationalize it a little bit by adding all of this Noah stuff and putting it against the backdrop of them trying to survive being body snatched by Nesbit, who's a penguin. And as much as I despise Gozaburo and even the big five, though they're not as important in this point, but I just think it's very important for understanding Kaiba's character to know that this was his upbringing. So that's super fun, but we got to get back to Battle City. So they end this arc in the only way they know how, which is to have Yami Merrick in the real world stumble out of the blimp because he's disgruntled and bored and be like, what is this? What's a computer? And then he stabs the computer with the Millennium Rod, causing it to malfunction. As this is happening, Noah has been won over by the love between Seto and Mokuba or something. I don't fucking know. And he is keeping Gozaburo from trapping everyone in the computer, which is now starting to fuck up. Noah helps everyone escape back into the real world and then helps self-destruct the computer with him and Gozaburo, and I guess the Big Five too, inside. And as the computer is destroyed, killing Gozaburo and Noah, back in the real world, the gang is back on the blimp and finally leaving, back en route to the finale of Battle City. And as they fly away and watch the wreckage of these two very traumatic figures from Kaiba's past, Kaiba literally says, "Let's never talk about this again." And they never do. The end of Battle City is good. We don't have to talk about it. Kaiba has more visions about his ancient Egyptian self-harassing Yugi pharaoh. It's a good time. Just watch it. It is worth noting that the location that Kaiba chose for the finals of Battle City, you know, all this way they came on this blimp, was actually this last remaining tower that his adopted father built. It's just not being used anymore. And once the finals are over, Kaiba just blows the whole thing up because it's symbolic. We love to see it, but we must keep moving. Season 4 isn't super important to talk about either. This is also an anime-only arc, so in some ways it's not that important to the actual plot. It's pretty self-contained, and Kaiba does have a bit of a story in it, with like him and Alistair. But it's just not super pertinent, so I'm gonna gloss over it. I'm sorry. I'm also gonna gloss over the Kaiba Corp Grand Prix because frankly I do not remember it super well. I'm not actually sure if I've ever watched this arc in its entirety. I must have at some point in my life, but I just don't remember it. There is more Kaiba plot in here, but again, it's an anime only arc. It doesn't contain too much important information. I know there's something with Kaiba and the guy. I forgot his name. I've already been talking for a really long time and it's trying to get really hot in this room. So I must continue. So the last arc of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime is the Millennium World arc or the Dark RPG arc. I forget. This is like, oh, this is the best shit, but it's such a shame because at this point, for whatever reason, the anime had depleted its budget, I suppose. It didn't have a budget and it looks like boo-boo, so that's too bad. Any real wonky screenshot of Kaiba you've ever seen in your life, it's from season 5. Season 5 is kind of weird because Kaiba doesn't really play an important role in it. In the manga, Kaiba's not actually even around for most of this arc. He literally just shows up at the end like, huh? His role is expanded a little bit more in the anime in that he actually is part of the Dark RPG, so he gets to like witness ancient Egypt as it happens. But I don't think this really contributes that much to the story because like he's not supposed to be there, so it's just kind of weird that he is. So there's not a lot to cover with Seto Kaiba in season 5, but it is important that we discuss Priest Seto. We finally get to meet ancient Egyptian Kaiba. Just as a quick overview, Priest Seto is basically Kaiba, but arguably a little bit better. Like, he obviously aligns more good than Kaiba, if that makes sense. You can just tell he's a little bit of a better person, whereas Kaiba isn't. He is a member of the Pharaoh's court. He's actually one of the keepers of the Millennium Rod, so that's cool. Without getting too deep into how everything worked in ancient Egyptian Yu-Gi-Oh times, his whole shtick is basically as part of this judgment ritual they did where, because everyone had a duel monster in their soul, so they would, weigh the souls, etc. Priest Seto's job was basically to use the Millennium Rod to reveal the monster spirit. He's a very talented magician. He worked his way up to this position because he, was poor growing up, etc. Except not really, sort of. There's a lot of family drama involved in the ancient Egyptian lineage type thing, and Priest Seto is actually part of the royal family. Him and the pharaoh are cousins, which is an adorable piece of trivia. But because stuff, his father abandoned him, and then they just both ended up in the pharaoh's court anyway, so fun times. And it's also fun because this is where we get to learn about why Kaiba is so incredibly horny for the Blue Eyes White Dragon. So, as I said before, Priest Seto's whole thing is that he can, like, make these monsters appear from people's souls. So he comes across this woman, Kisara, who is, like, very pale, like, white hair, which is very odd for ancient Egypt. And because of this, she's being, like, persecuted and, like, stoned. Seto saves her and discovers that her spirit monster is this incredibly powerful white dragon. So these two have this whole thing where, like, the court wants to use her soul dragon to fight the bad guys. And so they keep putting her in these perilous situations in order to trigger her summoning the dragon, and then Seto keeps saving her, and these two have a bit of a romance. Like, it's there. I forget how there it is because it's been a while since I've revisited the source material, but, like, there's romance there. So the reason that present day Kaiba is so obsessed with the Blue Eyes White Dragon is because in a past life, that was his girlfriend. It all makes sense. But yeah, it's a good time. It's a really good arc. If you've never experienced the actual ending of Yu-Gi-Oh! And are kind of interested in it now, read the Millennium World manga, because it's really good. But yeah, I do have to make one complaint. And it requires me to take us back to this stupid stone tablet. So throughout the series, starting in season 2, all these characters like Ishizu and eventually Yugi and, like, Merrick and everyone kind of negs Kaiba on because there's this fucking tablet that shows him and Yugi fighting, and then they keep having these visions of, like, Kaiba or Priest Seto fighting Yugi and, like, hurling insults at him, and everyone is just kind of giving Kaiba shit for this, and Kaiba's like, I mean, yeah, I want to fight Yugi, but that ain't me. But everyone's just like, well, it's on this stone tablet that you're gonna fight Yugi and you're bad. And Kaiba's like, But at the end of the series is when we finally get to see the origins of the stone tablet. And again, forgive me if I'm confusing the anime with the manga. I kind of don't really remember how much is covered in each, but I know the manga better, so maybe I'm breaking my own rule here, but whatever. But we finally get to see that what really happened is that Priest Seto was always on the pharaoh's side. Those two were pretty tight. It's just that because of all this family drama, Priest Seto's, like, actual biological father, Priest Akhenaten, who's also in the court, he becomes evil, and it's just like he becomes darkness. He becomes the dark priest to help Zork. If you don't know what these things mean, well, go read the manga. This is me convincing you to read the manga so you understand. Don't you want to know who Zork is? But yeah, he becomes a dark priest and he kills Kisara in front of Priest Seto. And those two are, like, have unspoken love, so this is really hard for Seto. And he ends up getting possessed by Dark Priest Akhenaten, his dad. So Priest Seto is possessed by darkness, and so he goes to fight Atem, and this is where all of these fighty moments come from, when he's possessed. And then Kisara's spirit appears to him, the Blue Eyes White Dragon, and saves him from the possession, so he's better now. And he has the Blue Eyes White Dragon to protect him, and it's a beautiful story. And then he fights by the pharaoh's side to defeat Zork. It was just a misunderstanding. And once the pharaoh, I'm just going to call him Atem now because we've reached that point in the plot. Once Atem dies and, becomes the Millennium Puzzle, whatever, once he's dead, due to the reveal of the actual, royal lineage and shit, Priest Seto actually becomes the next pharaoh. And as pharaoh, he has this stone tablet made to represent the friendship between him and Pharaoh Atem. So that tablet wasn't any type of prophecy. It wasn't any type of warning. It didn't really clearly depict events as they happened. It was something that Priest Seto himself made just to show that him and Atem were buds. And I think that's such bullshit. It's kind of funny to me that a lot of the series is spent misinterpreting all of these things of Priest Seto and Atem are gonna fight it out. That's the big thing. I think that's why in hindsight I'm so surprised that Zork and all of his forms and underlings are the actual villains of the entire Yu-Gi-Oh series, because you spend so much time being told that it's Kaiba, and Kaiba's not an antagonist of Yu-Gi-Oh. He just isn't. Just because he's a bad person doesn't mean he's a bad guy. There is just a lot of energy spent on making Kaiba himself, and by extension us the audience, think that he's the villain of this story, because he's not. But yeah, that's kind of the end of Yu-Gi-Oh. There's not much else to discuss in terms of Kaiba, so. But it's really good, so check it out if you haven't. But yeah, I just think Kaiba gets a lot of unnecessary shit in Yu-Gi-Oh. But honestly, does that affect Kaiba very much? Probably not. He doesn't believe in a lot of this ancient Egyptian stuff, maybe until the very end of the series. And even then it's still kind of I think maybe that's why he was around for the final arc in the anime, just to kind of really drive home that they really want to rub his face in it of no, it's real. But yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and say that affects him a whole lot. It definitely frustrates him. You can tell. There's points where he's able to read hieroglyphics and he's just oh, god damn it. But I wouldn't think that Kaiba experiences a lot of shame as being cast as the adversary. But one thing that always just gets me about Kaiba is that he truly never asked for any of this. I'm not gonna sit here and argue that Kaiba's not a bad person. He kind of is. He's very extreme. He's very self-centered. And he's a huge bitch. But in his defense, I don't think he wanted to be a part of this ancient Egyptian magic stuff. Out of everyone who's involved in the Millennium items and all of this kind of supernatural elements of Yu-Gi-Oh, Kaiba is the one person who didn't choose it and doesn't accept it. He's the only one who doesn't have a Millennium item at any point. It's not until later, at least by comparison to everyone else, that he starts to kind of get introduced to the magical elements involved in Yugi's life and apparently his own life. And that wasn't important to him at any point before Battle City, and even then he kind of doesn't buy it. And this bitch literally just wanted to game. That's kind of Kaiba's whole thing. He just kind of ended up being a bad evil businessman about it. But even that, I'd argue it was because he was raised by a bad evil businessman who was physically and emotionally abusive towards him, in my opinion. When Kaiba takes over Kaiba Corp and turns it from a military company into a game and entertainment company, he's literally only doing that because he likes games. I'd argue they were the biggest source of happiness in his awful childhood, so I guess that's just important to him. And when we meet Kaiba in episode 1, is he kidnapping someone and assaulting them? Yeah, but his only motive really is just because he really fucking loves card games, and he has he's very extreme about it. And then this short kid shows up and just destroys his ass at the card game that he's like the world champion of. And that's not weird to be upset about that. And to make it worse, he had magic, so he used a little bit of magic on Kaiba, and it gave Kaiba an entire existential crisis, and he had to fuck off to his little cliff house for a while, remove himself from society. Think about it. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the magic elements of the series are kind of the root of a lot of Kaiba's problems, and I just think it's kind of bullshit. I'm not trying to argue that Kaiba's a good person. I'm just saying he's just trying to go through his life being really fucking good at Yu-Gi-Oh! And running a multi-million-dollar corporation and creating unnecessary tech for playing games. And he's just minding his own business doing that. And then this group of LARPers show up and keep insisting that he's an Egyptian priest. And he's like, no, I'm a CEO. And they're like, okay, but we gotta fight. We gotta absolutely duke it out. Mind crush. And Kaiba's just such an extreme person. He really only knows how to deal with things at 100%, I suppose. So naturally, he keeps reacting really badly to all these situations. But I mean, you'd be kind of vindictive too. Everyone just gives Kaiba a lot of shit after waltzing in, stealing his thunder, and then engaging in non-consensual LARPing with him. And I feel for him. That's all. And I guess that's an argument you could make for Kaiba being a sad character once you think about it. But we're not done yet. Because in 2016 or 2017 in English, we got Dark Side of Dimensions, the Kaiba movie. Sometimes I get comments from people asking my opinion of Dark Side of Dimensions. My opinion of Dark Side of Dimensions is that it's a perfect movie. I think it's so good. Like I said before, my affection for Kaiba didn't bloom into full-blown love until well into adulthood. And that's because that's when Dark Side of Dimensions came out and broke my heart. I feel like there's plenty of people who didn't enjoy Dark Side of Dimensions, and I kind of get that. It's a really weird movie. It introduces a lot of very sudden, important details into the mythos of, the original Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's like, wait, what? But clearly that's not why I like it. And some people will criticize that this movie wasn't like a really interesting story for Yugi. And I'd argue that it's because this movie's not about Yugi. This movie is about Kaiba, and Yugi just kind of happens to be there to do the plot. Thanks, Yugi. And just to be clear, because otherwise, 100 of you will say it in the comments, Dark Side of Dimensions is a sequel to the manga specifically, because the anime and the manga do run in different continuities. Like, all of the major beats of both stories are basically the same, but there are slight differences, such as Kaiba not being there for most of the final arc of the manga. It's things like that. But yeah, I know. But yeah, Dark Side of Dimensions is basically the story about how Kaiba can't process grief. So Dark Side of Dimensions take place a while after the end of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's everyone's, last few weeks of school, I suppose. They're graduating basically right around the time the movie ends. And Kaiba is upset. And the plot of the movie is basically Kaiba wants to bring Atem back from the dead so he can finally beat him in a duel, because he never got to do that. And he's just very obsessed with bringing him back. So he decides to dig the Millennium Puzzle out of the destroyed tomb in Egypt and put it back together again in order to bring the pharaoh back, he believes. And in doing that, he makes a big old mess out of everything, because you're not supposed to do that. So this guy named Aigami shows up, and he's like trying to stop Kaiba from doing that, because you're not supposed to do that. There's this secondary magical element called Plana that they use, and there's this new millennium item called the Quantum Cube. So Kaiba just brute forces his way through this plot. He digs up the puzzle. He goes to space because he has a satellite now where he just hangs out and puts the puzzle back together using his supercomputer. And he's missing some pieces, so he has to do like a duel tournament with Aigami and Yugi to get the pieces back. Aigami like ends up becoming a scary cube demon, but Yugi and Kaiba have to duel, and Yugi gets so frustrated with Kaiba just kind of talking down to him and being like incredibly selfish and tunnel visioned about this whole thing, because like Yugi was the closest to Atem. They were literally like in the same body. They were just always together. Everyone else has moved past this. They've felt their feels and they've, you know, grown, and they're better now, and they have really great memories of Atem, but you know, he's gone. He died. That's normal, and that's great. That's healthy. Meanwhile, Kaiba, who in this timeline, you know, showed up right at the end, so he didn't even really get to get any remarks into Atem before he even died. So he truly had zero closure with the person that he considered his greatest rival, begrudgingly or not. And he's really just stuck in the denial stage of like, he's not gone. I can bring him back. And when I do, I'm going to kick his ass. So Kaiba just hasn't taken this whole situation well at all. And it's kind of gotten to the point where Yugi's like, I just got to fucking show him. So in the middle of their duel, Yugi puts the Millennium Puzzle back together. He puts in the final pieces and nothing happens. And Kaiba just gets so upset at this. He is so angry. And he's just like, he's a coward. He won't undie because he's scared of me. But then Aigami becomes a scary, spooky cube demon and he fucking kills Kaiba. And then Yugi has to beat him. And then the climax of the film, and I'm not really going to discuss the significance of this moment because I kind of have mixed opinions of it. But right at the end, Atem does come back for a moment because Yugi's about to like pass out and effectively lose the duel. And Atem shows back up to essentially finish the draw for him and play the final play and beat scary demon Aigami. And some people think that's a really reductive scene for Yugi and his growth. And other people think it's badass. And that's not the point. The point is Atem does come back. And Kaiba misses it. So at the end of the duel, when Aigami is back to normal and everyone is unkilled and unsent to another dimension or whatever happened to them, Kaiba comes back and like Yugi and his friends are talking about like, oh, so the Pharaoh did come back. Did he say anything? And then Kaiba approaches them and Yugi's like, well, I guess you were right, Kaiba. Sucks that you couldn't see him though. And Kaiba's acting very cool about it. He's like, it's fine. His actual line in the dub is something along the lines of like, Yugi, you have your bond with the Pharaoh and I have mine. And I know it's kind of alienating to some people for me to bring up the obvious queer subtext that is ever present in the entire Yu-Gi-Oh franchise, but also I don't care, so I'm going to bring it up. But I'm just saying, that's a line. The way that Kaiba like isolates himself in his space station, staring longingly at the Millennium Puzzle, like, can we pretend that airplanes in the night sky like shooting stars? I don't have a lot of thoughts about Kaiba's sexuality. He spends most of the series wanting to fuck a dragon, so I don't really care. But I'm just saying, it's kind of romantic. At best, it's a very tragic romance, and at worst, it's a very toxic obsession, like romantic, but in a Wattpad kind of way. But yeah, so Kaiba says some gay shit and then walks away pretending that he's fine. And then we get a little cut of like everyone going off to their happy endings. Like, you know, the gang graduates, Taya goes to America, Aigami and his sister are able to, you know, start anew and start a normal life or something. And it's just kind of a nice time. And then we cut to Kaiba's space station and he's up there tinkering And he has the quantum cube. I didn't really touch on what the quantum cube is. It's this thing Aigami has. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Fandom wiki says, using the cube, Aigami can transport people to an alternate dimension where they will disintegrate and die if not rescued. It can also directly disintegrate people. I love that. So Kaiba has this very powerful magical artifact. I guess Aigami dropped it when he turned into a scary cube demon, so now Kaiba has it. Good for him. But he's tinkering away on something and Mokuba comes on like the little intercom screen. He's just like, Seto, are you sure about this? Like, we don't know if it's going to work. We don't know if you'll have a way back. I forget exactly what he says, but those are all things that are implied. And Kaiba's like, nah, it'll be fine. Hey, take care of the company while I'm gone, Mokuba. So that's ominous. So then Kaiba sits back and launches his little tiny rocket ship. And as he launches it, the entire space station begins to disintegrate, which is a thing that we learned the quantum cube can do. But yeah, so everything starts to disappear and so does Kaiba. And the next we see of him, he is now in a desert. And far off in the distance, we can see the Pharaoh's palace from ancient Egypt. So he walks over there, enters the palace, and who is sitting at the throne but Atem himself, the real thing. I forgot to mention before that Kaiba basically spent months developing an Atem Tulpa that he can duel against in his VR games because he's obsessed. So I bet he was very excited in that moment. And then the two lock eyes. Atem smiles, and Kaiba readies himself to finally get to duel his greatest rival. But then you stop and think, wait, what? Here's the thing. Atem is dead. And then you realize that because Kaiba has this dimension jumping doohickey, he probably just jumped dimensions to be wherever Atem is, which is the afterlife. So Kaiba's dead. And because I know people are going to get real, hyper specific about things, I guess we can't be sure that Kaiba is dead. Like it was said, we can't be sure that he doesn't have a way back or anything, but it's kind of implied that he doesn't. And let's be real, Kaiba would. But yeah, really the only conclusion to reach is that Kaiba traveled to the afterlife essentially on a one-way ticket. So yeah, make of that what you will. And I don't know about you, but I think that ending is so good, but it's also incredibly haunting. It's kind of super sad, but it also makes so much sense for his character. So I'm just saying. So to circle back, this is the Kaiba movie. It is a fascinating character study of Kaiba experiencing grief. He can't process it, and like in every situation we've seen him in, he takes it to the extreme and follows his rival into the afterlife. And it's so interesting. And it's the point for me where Kaiba becomes, a tragic figure. Like, this guy obviously has hella control issues. He is always fighting to be kind of top of the food chain, number one, in control of shit. And when he's finally faced with the one thing he can't control, the death specifically of his, one true rival, he just doesn't know how to handle that situation because he can't do anything about it except for, some absolute batshit solution that he didn't think through. And I guess in hindsight, like, Atem was such a huge part of his life for the time he was in it because he basically ruined Kaiba's life. But yeah, he was just like a really big part of Kaiba's life. And Kaiba's kind of the one character who didn't get any closure with him because he showed up late to his death. So he didn't get to say anything. Even in the anime, I don't know if he really did anything other than watch, which I feel like it's kind of weird, but whatever. Maybe that's why things turned out better in the anime. I'll get to that. And I don't really know how a lot of people feel about the ending of Dark Side of Dimensions. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who think the ending was dog shit or like too weird or something. I think it's good. And I think that the entire story is just the natural progression of Kaiba's character as he kind of lost a lot of things. He lost his standing as a Duel Monsters champion. He kind of, whether it affected him a lot or not, lost a lot of certainty about his own belief and his understanding of the world because all this magic shit happened. And then he lost his rival. So I don't think it's weird that he kept pushing to bigger and bigger extremes, both in terms of unhealthy emotion and just in general. Like by Dark Side of Dimensions, he's developing solid vision holograms, which are just holograms you can touch. And it's just like, that is neat, but do you really think that's a good idea, Kaiba? But yeah, I think Dark Side of Dimensions really knocks it out of the park in terms of making Kaiba look really sad and pathetic and making me sad and emotional for him. And I feel like, not to be holier than thou about it, but I just feel like a lot of people maybe don't pay close attention to that depth of his character and flanderize him as like an eccentric billionaire, which he is, and that's fun. And we like to not think about, the fact that Kaiba is a pretty fucked up person. But so I don't want to leave this video on a downer and would like to offer you a thought. So like I said, Dark Side of Dimensions doesn't technically happen in the continuity of the anime. It's a different timeline. And like I mentioned before, there is this change in the anime where Kaiba was around to see Atem off and be there on that whole adventure in the final arc of the anime. So, maybe this Kaiba got closure, because in the anime timeline, Kaiba just goes on to continue living life. And we actually see Kaiba at, in his late 20s, around 30 years old or something, in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. He does indeed make an appearance. And I've mentioned this before in passing, but Kaiba actually helped found Duel Academy. Kind of forget whether he straight up founded it or if he just financed the whole thing, but he is a founder of Duel Academy. And that's a very funny thought to me. Like, people will point out that Obelisk Blue is the highest ranked dorm because it was Kaiba's card, and then Slifer is the lowest because that was Yugi's. And yes, that is delightful. But an even more delightful thought is that Kaiba is, to some degree, responsible for Duel Academy. And like, we all know what happens at Duel Academy. And I just like to imagine that Kaiba is hanging out at his cliffside house, developing some new gaming tech. He gets a phone call from Chancellor Shepard being like, hey, the school's gone. And 29-year-old Kaiba's just like, what do you mean the school's gone? So that's my comforting thought that I leave you on. In one timeline, Kaiba's kind of, sort of, possibly dead, and that's a little bit sad. But in a different timeline, Kaiba is a board member of a school, and that school is Duel Academy. One of the most dangerous schools I've ever seen in fiction. And I just think that's really cute, so that'll be our final thought for the day. Brains off, everybody. I also just really need to wrap this up. I don't know if you can tell by my increasing dishevelment, but it's getting very hot in this room. I've been recording for a really long time. Oh God. But yeah, at long last, my thoughts on Kaiba. Freed upon the world, you're welcome. I don't really have a plan for another video for the time being. I don't really know what else to do. So maybe leave some topics you'd be interested in hearing me discuss in a comment or something. Maybe I'll just do like a Q&A or something, like responding to comments, rapid fire my questionable opinions. I don't know. But I also have no shortage of things to do, so maybe I just won't upload for a while. Let me know what you think. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'm excited to read your nitpicks in the comments, and yeah. Goodbye.